Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the world, nay, universe premiere of PolyTicks. This is our newest show, hosted by myself, Micah Robinson, and
Jackson Bryman. Hi, I'm Jackson Bryman. I am 5'0" and 0.00 inches. And for fun, I look at Dave's redistricting atlas and try to gerrymander as many congressional districts as possible because why not?
so yes, Jackson is the political one of us. So that's what our show is about, politics. So today we have a really special first episode. As of recording, it is Super Bowl Sunday, February 2nd, which is one of the most palindromic dates, which I'm excited about. 2020-0202. So, for you today, we have a little bit of polling statistics, speculation, and impeachment news. So, Jackson, why don't you kick it off?
Now, of course, we chose this name for this podcast, PolyTicks, not only because it is a double entendre and because it sounds like the word politics, but because, a tick is a blood-sucking insect that causes a disease, and poly is a prefix meaning many. So often in the realm of politics, we get people that start acting like many blood-sucking insects, and that is why we think aptly titled this show.
So on this episode of PolyTicks, we have for you some speculation on the Iowa caucus, some impeachment news, and some polling statistics. So, Jackson, why don't you start us off with what's going on tomorrow? How is it relevant? And what are we going to talk about?
Yeah. Well, for those that are new to the political world, the 2020 election really starts tomorrow. Tomorrow is the Iowa caucuses, and it is the first voting of the 2020 election. Democrats from all across the state will get together and caucus in high school gymnasiums or auditoriums, and they will collectively send a vote and caucus for a specific candidate. And this is widely regarded as really important because it's kind of a trendsetter, if you will, for the national race. It has greater implications for the entire 2020 race. It carries enormous weight on the continuation of the other people voting, and I think a lot of people actually have an issue with Iowa going first because it carries so much weight and because its demographics don't represent the National Democratic Party's demographics. So for those that have been politicals for a while, you might have heard the phrase that black women are the backbone of the Democratic Party. And while Iowa is a wonderful state, it is in the Midwest and it is very white. And the amount of black women that live in Iowa, while not insignificant, is certainly much smaller than the amount of black women that live in, say, Georgia or Texas. And so a lot of people have raised concerns about why states like Iowa and New Hampshire vote first in the primary season. And that is certainly something that can be discussed. And, which states could go first to make that representation better.
And that's, of course, so that when you're starting off with the primaries, that you have a representative group in the first state.
Yeah.
And while in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't make that much difference, as all of the states are still going to have a caucus and vote, it just sets a mood which may not be accurate of the nation.
So, I mean, voters are typically informed, but they're not exclusively independent. And so when they hear certain news coming out of a state that comes first, they are more likely to have their vote influenced by that decision. And so Iowa has changed voting patterns across the country and, has led many to speculate, well, how would this state have voted in the primary if Iowa did not go first? And so there have been many proposals to have more diverse states like California or Virginia or Texas go first and kind of let the country know we're first, we represent the entire Democratic Party, and that's how it should happen. But alas, as of now, tomorrow we will start the Iowa caucuses. They've been going first since 1972, and it doesn't seem set to end anytime soon.
So Iowa caucus is tomorrow, and then, of course, we have Super Tuesday after that, correct?
March 3rd, yeah.
Right off the bat, I want to ask you, who are you supporting?
Who am I supporting? Well, I like to vote strategically. So I personally align with Amy Klobuchar on a lot of policy. She's moderate. She's from the heartland. I think she'd be great for this country. But knowing that she's unlikely to gain much traction outside of Iowa, in the California primary, I would, if I could vote, I would probably vote for Elizabeth Warren. Um, if I lived in Iowa, of course, I'd caucus for Klobuchar. And you, Mr. Robinson?
I have kind of been behind Warren for as long as she's been running, right? I did an 8th grade project where we did campaign material and stuff for a candidate, and while some people chose LeBron James or Steph Curry, I went for you know Elizabeth Warren, and I just think that she has what it takes to win. She embodies what the Democratic Party is, unlike some cough cough Sanders, but
Bernie Sanders, for those who don't know, he is running as a Democrat, but he has not been elected to an office as a Democrat ever. He's a senator from Vermont, and he's a democratic socialist. He is an independent, and a lot of people have raised concerns about, well, is he really going to represent the Democratic Party if he's not actually a Democrat?
yeah. So I I'm for Warren. She seems like the best mix of electability, representing the party, and of course, it would be awesome to have a female president. So that's who I'm supporting. Um, uh, Other than that, I think especially Andrew Yang and Pete Buttigieg are very interesting candidates. I don't want to say that they would make good presidents because I am not sure of that. I think that neither of them really have the experience necessary. Um, but I think that they're very interesting candidates to watch as well. Because at this stage, things are really all up in the air. There could be a comeback. There could be, there are still time for the front runners to drop out.
Yeah,
I think it's really interesting to watch, and I'm really watching those 3 candidates.
yeah. That's a fascinating point because actually, all three of those have had traction in certain places where otherwise they wouldn't. So if there was a vote to be held nationwide on one day, like it was Super Tuesday, the entire country voted. We even have an potentially, hypothetically, had an electoral college system to determine a primary winner. It would be unlikely that Andrew Yang or Pete Buttigieg would get very far. They'd probably poll anywhere between 5 and 15%. But both candidates are doing better than they are nationally in Iowa, and I personally don't know why. At least for Andrew Yang, for Pete Buttigieg, I think he kind of appeals to that state's sensibilities. He certainly represents their demographic, and I think a lot of them have seen a lot of establishment candidates and want a candidate with establishment policies, but not an establishment feel, which is why Joe Biden might be a turnoff for them. But people like Pete Buttigieg, who are new to the political scheme, might be attractive to them.
Yeah. So, uh, you briefly mentioned polling.
I did.
Polling, uh, I am not as much watching the polling as you are, but how are things going in Iowa? What is it looking like?
Well, first, I'd actually like to give you the national polls just to compare with Iowa. So, former Vice President Joe Biden is currently leading the national polls with a 27.2% average, followed by Bernie Sanders at 23.5 and Warren at 15, and then Buttigieg at 8, and then Mike Bloomberg at 8, and Buttigieg at 7. But in Iowa, the scheme was a little bit different. Bernie Sanders is actually leading the caucus. 24.7% is his aggregate poll stats. If you go to realclearpolitics.com, they will give you this. This is where I'm getting it from. Then followed by Biden at 21% and Buttigieg at Warren basically at a tie with about 15.5. And then Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar is in fifth at 8.3% in Iowa. And I would like to tell you that there was this poll that was supposed to come out yesterday, the Des Moines Register poll, led by a pollster named J. Ann Selzer, who is the widely regarded to be the best poller in Iowa. She did very well in predicting the 2016 election results in Iowa, giving a big lead to Trump. He did win Iowa by 9.5 points. Correctly predicted the 2014 Senate race in Iowa. She has done very well in predictive in the predictive realm. But the poll was supposed to come out yesterday when a member of the Pete Buttigieg camp alerted them that his name had been left off the register when pollsters, called his supporters and asked him, and his name was off the list. And they actually pulled the poll, so that poll will not be released at all, which indicates that there was certainly more than one call in which Pete Buttigieg's name was left off. And there's been a lot of Twitter speculation, unfortunately, about why this is happening. Some people think that it's because of Bernie and that he was doing well and they don't want him to succeed. Some people think that the Des Moines Register intentionally messed with the poll to try to spice up the caucuses. And most people just think it's normal human error that can be remedied. But this certainly gives us with a greater sense of uncertainty going into the caucuses.
Of course. So, right now, do you think that the actual turnout and vote is going to be similar to polling? Because that's always a concern that different people will be actually voting as to the people who say they're going to vote for someone, right?
Yeah, I we saw that in 2016 a lot. A lot of people were shy Trump voters. Uh, they said they would vote for Clinton or Gary Johnson on a poll and ended up voting for Donald Trump. That's why he was able to win Iowa with a larger amount than expected. That's why he was able to win states like Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. I usually Democrats who are polled tend to be less wobbly, less undecided than Republicans. But this is an unusually indecisive year. If you gather together, the top five candidates polling, you're only going to get to about 70%. So there's certainly at least a quarter of Iowa Democratic voters who are not decided. And my guess is that they will break for either Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden.
Right. They're the two big front runners, and they kind of have the widest appeal to American citizens, right?
Yeah, they're the most well known. I think their coalition, despite some ire from other camps, the Bernie Sanders coalition is as diverse as the Joe Biden coalition. It's different, but they're both very diverse.
Right. So, who do you predict will win Iowa, and how is that going to kind of set the stage, the national stage?
This is actually quite fascinating because Iowa has actually become less and less of a bellwether throughout the years. Joe Biden has a big firewall in the South. He does very well with African American voters due to his tie with Barack Obama, and I think Bernie Sanders will win the caucus, but I think it will be close. It will be probably 2 to 3 points. He'll probably get, because of the undecideds breaking, it'll probably be a clean first and second, and then with a lot of people behind. So my prediction is Bernie Sanders at about 30%, Joe Biden at 28%, Warren and Buttigieg hanging somewhere at the mid-teens, and then Klobuchar at 9 or 10, and then somebody will vote for Tulsi Gabbard. I don't know who, but there are other candidates behind those five.
Right. We're gonna get a few write-ins.
Of course. Yeah.
So this is kind of to be expected that Klobuchar, Warren, they're not getting kind of the support in Iowa. You would see those more maybe in California or New York, right towards the coast.
Yeah.
So that's the Iowa caucus, and then how do you think that will kind of inform Super Tuesday, or how do you think Super Tuesday will swing for any of these candidates?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I don't think it will swing Super Tuesday all that much. I think that what it will swing is probably the way candidates campaign. So Iowa will vote tomorrow, New Hampshire will vote on the 11th, and I think let's say, just for the sake of it, Pete Buttigieg has an exceptionally strong day in Iowa. He comes in second or even first. That might not affect other people's decisions, but he might want to think, oh, I have momentum. He might campaign more, and the candidates campaigning will probably affect the voters more than the actual results do. Super Tuesday is a very diverse coalition of states: California, Utah, Colorado, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, Virginia, North Carolina, Minnesota, Maine, Vermont, and Massachusetts all vote on that day. And it is widely expected that Bernie and Biden kind of split the vote there, with Warren maybe snagging Massachusetts.
Right. So, that's kind of that's how the caucuses are going. right now, I want to kind of move on because we're trying to keep these episodes to around 20 minutes. Kind of wanted to touch on the impeachment and John Bolton and kind of his book and the revelations that came out with that. So right from the outset of this impeachment hearing, everyone kind of knew in their hearts that he was going to get acquitted. Nothing was going to happen really. Um,
It's hard to be impeached. It requires 67 votes, which is right, slightly more than 2/3, or exactly 2/3. And because our country is polarized and we have states that have different voting patterns than others, it is extremely unlikely that one party gets to 67 senators. And so for impeachment to happen, the founders designed it so that it has to be so horrible that it garners bipartisan support for removal. And had Nixon's impeachment actually gone to the Senate, that would have happened. What he did was certainly, in the eyes of that Senate then, way very illegal, very impeachable, and they would have convicted him. But with Trump, what he did may have been a crime, may have been very impeachable. But today we are so polarized. Our senators are so kind of under the lock of Trump. Trump wields enormous influence over the United States Senate. One tweet that could signal support for a primary challenger, and that senator's gone. That happened last year in 2018. There was a representative named Mark Sanford from South Carolina. He was kind of a never Trumper. He was pretty moderate. He spoke against some of the president's policies, and President Trump tweeted support for his primary challenger, and that primary challenger won. And then Democrats won that seat in the 2018 election.
Yeah. So that's always kind of the big concern with this. I think from the onset, with this impeachment, I did not see the kind of forethought, right? There are so many things that are impeachable about what he's done, but it seems like this is something that it is impeachable, it is illegal, but it seems in the grand scheme of things kind of small and very nitpicky, right? And so I think that is a reason why there isn't really any bipartisan support pretty much at all. There are, a few senators who said that they are, quote unquote open, but of course, when it comes down to the final vote, it's going to be split on party lines.
Mm-hmm.
And because, he has the Senate, there really is almost no chance for impeachment. And I think kind of the final nail in the coffin was witnesses, right? That was kind of the big thing of the week. Are there going to be witnesses? And this kind of the final nail in the coffin.
Of course,
it's going to be an acquittal.
So we saw a witness vote for us. The Senate was having questions for the past 10 days. Chief Justice John Roberts was presiding, and after there were questions, and after John Bolton's book dropped, a lot of people saw hope in the Senate. Was set to vote on whether to call witnesses, and that would extend the Senate trial. It would give more evidence, give more information, and it was seen as an opening for a lot of Democrats because it might have swayed some Republican senators to see that figure of the Trump campaign and Trump administration reveal such damaging information. And we had a vote, and it failed 49-51 not to subpoena any more witnesses. Now, for those who know, the Senate breakdown is 53-47 Republican. That means 2 Republican senators did vote for witnesses. Mitt Romney of Utah, he ran for president in 2012, lost to Obama. And Susan Collins of Maine, who was a relative moderate, who was trying to, my guess is to save her re-election chances in Maine, which is definitely a light blue state. So Mitch McConnell, being the Machiavellian genius that he is, let those 2 vote that way and kept the other swing Republican votes, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and Lamar Alexander of Tennessee, had them vote no for witnesses, and that's basically the end of the trial. They will vote on whether to convict or acquit on Wednesday, but we don't know what's going to turn out.
Right. And that kind of it does seem like an interesting idea to let some Republicans vote for witnesses, because it even if it really isn't, it gives the appearance of at least some bipartisanship. So you can kind of point to that and say, well, no, we there were Republicans who voted for this, and so that's
I do think Democrats made a mistake when they hired impeachment managers to kind of present their case to the Senate, and the one Republican turned independent who voted for impeachment in the House, Justin Amash from Michigan's third congressional district, they did not even ask him to be an impeachment manager, and I think that gave a lot of Senate Republicans the idea that this impeachment was so partisan that there wasn't a single Republican who presented that case for impeachment, and I don't blame them for not wanting to impeach a president over something that might have been illegal, but is so partisan that it didn't seem right to have that happen.
yeah. There were strategical errors on the Democratic side, both with bringing it for this offense and doing it in the way that they did. Overall, do you see any, you know, there's really no hope at this point.
Oh no, no, no! If yeah, I actually think that Romney and Collins might have voted for witnesses and then might vote to you know not convict the president. They would probably vote to acquit. I There might even be some Democratic senators voting to not convict. There are three Democratic senators that are, one would say, either the most moderate or have the most electoral considerations. Kirsten Sinema from Arizona is a very conservative centrist Democrat who is from a swing state that is moving to the left. And a lot of people have issues with that because she was first elected in 2018. She's not up for another 6 years or 4 years. She has time for that state to get bluer and vote her conscience, but she has a record of centrism. Joe Manchin from West Virginia, the second most Republican state in the union. For anybody who can name the most Republican state, I will give you my approval. He is very conservative because he has to represent that state well. And then there's Doug Jones from Alabama, who won the special election against our favorite pedophile, Roy Moore, in 2017. He's up this year. And I don't think he's personally centrist. He seems like the kind of person who has electoral considerations and will probably lose in 2020, this November anyway. So we might even see a Senate vote that is 56-44 against conviction, although that is unlikely.
Right. And that's just because, at this point it's become just more politics, right? What are the constituents going to, respond to? So,
yeah.
And that's kind of what the Democrats on the onset were hoping was going to be avoided.
Indeed, yeah.
So, do you think that, you kind of touched on this before, but do you think that witnesses are going to be, or rather would have been beneficial?
If witnesses would have been called to vote, that means Lisa Murkowski and Lamar Alexander would have had to buck Mitch McConnell a significant amount, which is difficult. But let's say in that dream scenario they did, and witnesses was 51-49 for witnesses. We'd have another week or two of a trial. And I think most importantly to a lot of Democrats, Trump would not be able to claim exoneration by any legislative body for his State of the Union, which is the day after the Iowa caucuses on Tuesday. So do I think that he would have still been convicted? No. Do I think we might have had more than half of the Senate vote to convict? Yeah, I would have predicted that with witnesses, with more testimony, we might have seen 55 senators vote to convict, 53-55. And which would Trump could not label that as exoneration, because even though it's 2/3, if it's over 50%, that means most of the Senate, thinks you did something wrong and should be removed, which is hard for a president to claim as exoneration.
Right. And kind of going back to the State of the Union, the Senate is going to, vote to acquit him before that, or at least that's the plan.
They're not actually. They're going to vote on Wednesday, which is the day after. But it doesn't matter. I mean, Trump will claim all that stuff on a State of the Union because of what the witness vote revealed. He will certainly rile his base by saying that he is exonerated by that.
Right. And you just mentioned riling his base. Is that going back to the caucuses, are the Republican caucuses, is there really any competition for Trump? Because this is, you know, that would be ideal to maybe have a Sanders situation where, a second, really, low polling, but polling high enough to engage Trump and pull voters away. Is that, a possibility at all, or?
I'm sure, what exactly do you mean by that? As in, like, pull Trump voters away from Trump?
Yeah, like Sanders did with Clinton in the 2016 election, pulling at the base.
Oh, I think that the big Sanders thing was that much of his vote came from registered Democrats who were very conservative and against the Clintons, and didn't necessarily support Bernie Sanders, but voted as a protest vote against Clinton. And then there were that 15% of his base that voted for Sanders and not for Clinton. Those were mostly college educated or college students that did not like how moderate Clinton was, and then voted third party or even voted for Trump in protest. As for a Democrat who can do that, I think Klobuchar and Buttigieg, maybe Biden, have the strongest chance of pulling away Trump voters. My issue with Warren is that while she is great at turning out the base, she's unlikely to convert many Trump voters. And so each candidate has their weaknesses and strengths. And thus, if each is nominated, they will have different places of improvement or de-improvement in the fall.
Right. I'm talking, I'm talking that's, of course, a good point. I'm talking about people like Bill Weld, Joe Walsh, Republicans who might pull at Trump's base from the inside.
Yes. Oh, that's not going to happen. No. Trump, all the people who voted for Trump and currently support Trump and who are Republicans, none of them are ever going to go away from Trump. I mean, Trump mentioned during his 2016 campaign, I can stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and not lose a supporter. And while that sounded outrageous at the time, I don't disagree with that in the slightest now. He has such a lock over the 40% of Americans that support him that it is assured that no matter what he does, he will get 39 to 42% of the vote in November, and he will get almost 100% of the vote in the primary.
Right.
It's not going to happen.
So it would really be Democrats pulling at the centrist Republicans.
Exactly, or the white working class that were alienated by Clinton and voted for Trump not because they particularly agreed with his policies, but because they needed a break from the establishment. And I think those are the voters that voted for Trump but didn't support Trump. You can vote for somebody and not support them. That's the key. Those that voted for Trump and don't support him or didn't support him then, that's who we need to turn back. Because as we get closer to Election Day, if we don't make a play for those people are going to have to make a decision, and a lot of them will break for Trump because they just can't deal with the Democratic energy. That's what happened in 2016. That's why they lost.
Right. So those are some speculations on the state of the primaries, impeachment, and the ever drawing near 2020 election. So stay tuned next week. Hopefully we should have a new episode breaking down Super Tuesday, the Iowa caucus, and the inevitable acquittal of President Trump, and what that means for America. So thank you for listening. I am Micah Robinson, Jackson Bryman, and this is PolyTicks.